All right, we are live. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have a really great panel of speakers today. We cannot wait to get this show on the road and ask them a couple of questions. But first, my name is Andrew Whipp, and I am the lead creative and editor at Greenbuzz Agency. And I'm also joined by my good friend and colleague, Todd Plotkin, who's the CEO and founder of Greenbuzz Agency. Todd, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing fantastic. I am in basketball nirvana. The Boston Celtics are up 2-0 on the Philadelphia 76ers, so I couldn't be happier about that. And then we have these amazing series with the Lakers and the Blazers and the Mavericks and the Clippers. And so I'm just watching a ton of basketball. And then in terms of the webinar, it's always great to have some friends of the agency join, and Liz and Ab are absolutely that. So I'm just very excited to be chatting with them today.
As am I. Yeah, I don't think we've had Nirvana in basketball here since the 70s in DC. So I'm still waiting for that feeling, but I can feel it emanating off of you even from here, Todd. As a quick aside, if any of our audience members ended up here and don't know who we are or what we do, Greenbuzz Agency is a full-service video production company, and we're based out of Old Town Alexandria, and we specialize in documentary, motion graphics, branded content, any video production under the sun. So if you or your teams are curious about the process of making a video or looking to tell your own story, please don't hesitate to reach out. Bringing it back around, today's webinar is the 11th in our Greenbuzz Agency webinar series. They're flying by, which we created to connect our community with thought leaders who can help us break down top-line strategy and best practices during this pandemic. So today we'll be covering management of creative services to drive success in 2020 and beyond. So if you're looking to stay on top of the future of digital media and bring some new ideas back to your teams, then you're in the right place. Time to jump over to our panelists. Today we're joined by Liz Ott and Ab Imam and our very own Todd Plotkin. Liz is the president of ThreeSpot, a DC-based digital agency dedicated to serving clients who are committed to helping others. At ThreeSpot, Liz has supported clients such as the UN Environment, the Hilton Foundation, and the National Park Service. She's also the former president of AIGA-DC and currently serves as communications director on the B Corp Mid-Atlantic Steering Committee. And Ab is the founder of WDG, an award-winning Arlington-based digital strategy firm. WDG's experienced creative WordPress and Drupal development teams support C-level executives of Fortune companies and nonprofits to implement digital change. Ab has led WDG's work with clients such as American Red Cross, PBS, Discovery Education, and Kleenex. So thank you, Liz and Ab, for swinging by today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your insights and your experiences with us. We are super excited to jump in. So now that we've got that out of the way, Liz, I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew and Greenbuzz, for hosting us today and bringing us together for this conversation. To add on what Andrew just said, ThreeSpot is a digital strategy and communications agency. We are a team of multidisciplinary problem solvers who are committed to leaving the world a better place than we found it. We work exclusively for organizations and socially responsible businesses who are advancing a society that is more humane, open, peaceful, and equitable. So, among other causes, our clients are focused on climate change, social justice, and healthcare, just to name a few. So now that we got through all of the buzzwords about what we do, we are really focused on values. At the core of all the creatives on our team is a commitment to cause. That doesn't mean that they don't care about craft and high quality creative. In fact, that is actually core to most of them. However, they all geek out as well on a cause and or an organization that is doing impactful work. It isn't a really easy person to hire for, but it speaks to why we have employees that come and stay for so long. So in addition to our focus on values, we always say that we don't get hired by organizations, we get hired by people. So building and maintaining authentic relationships is equally important to us, both internally and externally. So the past 5 months have really tested all of us in various ways, but for me, it was a time that proved that having a strong foundation of these relationships has really worked to our advantage. staying motivated in the type of work that we do, but even universally, is always a challenge, let alone when it feels like the world is collapsing around you. However, I think that it's easier when you care about the work that you're doing, and so that's something that really is important to us. So in early March, when we started acknowledging that we were going to switch to go remote, I really found myself trying to center around what are the goals as we move forward. For me, it was really important that in all this chaos that we find some level of consistency and stability throughout. We knew that we were heading into an unknown and unpredictable future, and that was just key to moving forward for me. In addition, given everything that was going on, which was good for me because I find myself to be pretty high on the empath scale when it comes down to it, but really making sure that you're listening to people and leading with empathy and finding moments for radical candor where you're able to speak through and get to the goal of an issue while empathizing with the person is also important. And then on top of all this, we wanted to continue to deliver our clients. We wanted to make sure we were still giving high quality, creative, and smart and elegant solutions. So some ways that played out was we have a really autonomous team at 3Spot, which is really amazing in terms of self-motivation and creativity. However, it's never been something that we emphasized a rigid schedule. So people always arrived anywhere between 8 and 10:30 and left between 4:30 and maybe 7:30. Which, if it was consistent of the people that arrived early and left early, it would be one thing, but it wasn't always the case, which was fine because it was about managing to the work that needed to get done. And that's a whole lot easier to do when you're seeing people in person and, working alongside them. In addition, video, truthfully for us, was something that we only leveraged occasionally because we really valued being in person with our clients when we were presenting work. We didn't use it that much we didn't use Zoom or Google Hangouts when we were presenting, only occasionally. So moving into the pandemic, from day one, we set a pretty rigid schedule. This went against our nature, but I knew that things would unravel quickly if we didn't set clear expectations around working hours, given that we weren't going to be seeing each other anymore. So since we started, people check in at 8 a.m. every day, and they don't depart before 5 p.m. We check in and check out in Slack, which may seem pretty rigid and is not for everyone, but I do think that it was a way to provide some stability for us and really avoid some of the fray that happens at the end of the day where people that had been working since 8 a.m. needed to stay online to catch up to get a hold of people that were coming later. It forced a more centralized and all of us being able to work more synchronously throughout that time. Now, for parents, this is a different story. And so what I did was I reached out to all of them as a group and said that the key was finding some level of consistency, even if that needed to evolve and change. So I ended up having individual conversations with each of them to kind of find a schedule that made sense, with the goal being really not over-promising. We understood that there might need to be more flexibility to balance their family needs given everything that was going on, and that could evolve as the time went on, but it was important that we were both communicating both internally and externally what felt feasible. And then finally, in terms of the video, we obviously are using it all the time now. It's become essential. It's something that we, even for internal meetings, we've asked that video is always on. So even if it's a quick check-in, we turn video on just because that's giving that face time that we're missing. So it's still, nobody's really complained too much about the 8 a.m. wake up and being online. And I don't know if they're thanking me for the structure, but I do think it's allowed us to really turn off once the workday ends and not have to think about it until we return the next morning. So, and when you think about agency life, it always requires a hustle. We work with pretty large clients, but since we're focused in the nonprofit space, the value of the dollar is always top of mind. Even before the pandemic, we were always looking for new challenges and never took our work for granted. However, the past several months has really put a fine point on that nothing can be taken for granted. Nothing is a given. We worked hard to revisit all of our existing client work to really assess and evolve and figure out what was needed. This was something that was sensitive. The last thing on people's minds were the contracts and the project plans that we had set with them. And so we tried to give it space and navigate when was the appropriate time to talk to people and how to figure out what was needed or what needed to go on pause. A couple examples, we work with a client in the environmental space to put together a digital organizing toolkit that was all about the climate change. And as a result, given everything that was going on, it was almost ready to launch and they needed to pause it because it just felt a little tone deaf to launch it with such extreme things happening. And so they still haven't launched it. And for us, that's, been on hold. We haven't done anything. We've just started up conversations now on how to relaunch it. And similarly, clients in the education space have had to really shift from where we were focused on helping their educators on content strategy and being able to easily communicate online. All of a sudden that paused because they had to shift to being able to serve courses online, which wasn't something that they were prepared for. However, this also worked to our advantage in some spaces. So in the healthcare space, we work with one foundation that was really needed to up their work and pivot quickly to meet the need around patients struggling with COVID-19. And so in that case, it was a chance for us to really ramp up our efforts and meet the need where it was. And this also in the social justice space, we do some work with Color of Change as well. And this was a moment they were waiting for on many levels. And for us, it was how can we act quickly to make sure we're delivering what they need and keeping some of the digital stuff away from them as a worry so that they can focus on the subject matter that matters. So then when you take a look at the in-person versus virtual, while we focus on digital solutions, our internal culture was really centered around regular touch points for our team. We had weekly 4:30 clubs, which were happy hours. We have a Monday stand-up every week. We had a monthly town hall where everybody got together and we served breakfast. Every summer we do a large scavenger hunt over the city. And yes, we love karaoke, me especially. And these were all things that we did and we love being together, and it's this chance for us to get outside of the work and connect with each other. Of course, we were always using email, Slack, Google Hangouts, and Zoom, but that was something that stood next to our in-person communication. And of course, now we are overly dependent on this. We are Zooming all the time. The Zoom fatigue is real. And I think our reliance on tools such as Slack has become more important, but it's really the silly channels like Birds or Film and TV. And yes, we also have a trash TV channel. Those become sources of levity throughout our days and our weeks and chances to connect with people on the team to keep people motivated. We've also been able to maintain stand-ups and town halls and happy hours via Zoom. They're obviously not the same and something we're always exploring ways to create more engagement. We've explored all kinds of games and conversations starters to try to encourage what we're all missing, these spontaneous conversations, these moments to really connect in a less forced way. So one of the things we've considered is really asking teams to go off mute when we're in group meetings, just to encourage a little bit more conversation and not make it feel like you're just talking at a bunch of people. In terms of some of the things, when I look back over the time, these past couple of months that we'll take with us, tip number one is encourage self-care. It's been important to really make sure that people are taking the time off, even if you can't go anyplace. Take that time to, not have to focus on work. Take breaks, feed your kids, do what you need to do. Even though we're there from 8 to 5, we tell people, take the breaks you need, just make sure you're communicating to your team if you're not going to be available. We fully understand that Zoom school needs to be happening and that you're going to still have to walk your dog. It's just more about having consideration for your team and making sure they're aware that that you're going to be away for a while. So we've encouraged people to use PTO and take breaks when necessary. Both internally and externally, I've been emphasizing the importance of finding time and moments to connect. All of these moments, all touch points, whether it be with clients or your internal teams, are really a moment to find these connections. I mentioned earlier, it helps to have that foundation, but like anything, that requires ongoing attention and care. And during these remote times, even 5 minutes at the end of the meeting to ask about a person's dog really matters. Additionally, we've started a newsletter, which we conveniently started in January. And this has been a chance for us to really write about relevant events, to share our feelings, to share our opinions on them. It's where we highlight our work and, more importantly, the work of our clients. And it's an opportunity for us to stay connected to our clients and share a little bit about what we're thinking about and hear from them. And I've gotten responses to them, and it's been a great opportunity to find moments to connect. Reach out to me if you want to sign up, shameless plug. And then finally, listening is always important, but it's become essential these past couple of months. It is impossible to deny the stress and anxiety that everybody was and is feeling. My goal throughout this time has been finding ways to help people refocus, to find inspiration, to not allow the broader situation impact our ability to continue to deliver great work. My hope is that these months, trying to find the silver lining in it all, is that we've been able to shift perspectives, whether it be personally or professionally, that it's allowing us time to reflect on what matters most and how we can all help to fight the status quo. And so many of the typical problems and issues that used to come up in our day-to-day work life, they just become less significant when you're compared to the health of humanity or a crumbling education system or a national reckoning with racism. It becomes a little bit harder to complain about getting an email late or things that matter less. So for us, and this isn't for everyone, this allowed us a renewed commitment to cause. It became easier for us to focus on our work and stay motivated on why we do what we do and how best we can help our clients to meet their goals. And it helped us to not let this commitment end with just a new website or a digital campaign, but really to bring this focus outside and find ways to be an active contributor within our community and our society. So I could talk about this for forever, but I look forward to the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Ab to talk for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That was awesome. And as Liz mentioned, there's a lot of these things that are very similar to our organization. So I'll keep my conversation brief because I'm sure that there's a lot of Q&A that we'd love to help with. But essentially, we're an Arlington-based digital strategy firm. We work with some amazing clients, anything from Fortune companies to a lot of the local large nonprofits. Our specialties are really the content-heavy, complex websites and with a lot of integration and touch points for personalization. So that's a little bit about what we do. It's actually interesting. So we're talking about the creative process and, with the current pandemic and so forth. So I'm actually dialing in from Switzerland today. So a lot of this stuff really came from, us also experimenting with what is, the new normal, like what is working complete virtual and complete remote. So my family and I literally like 2 months ago, we just took the chance and we said, well, look, our kids' school is going to be completely online. So we're going to be online. Our office is pretty much closed at the end of the year. Let's take the chance and let's move pretty much to Europe for the next 6 months. We're going to be here for the rest of the year. But as I'm here, I'm starting to learn about what working virtual really is and how all this stuff works and sort of digging into what works and what doesn't work, especially because, if I'm back home, even if there is an issue whatsoever, it still feels close because your team is nearby and getting on Zoom and so forth, you still feel like that distance of 10, 15 miles and things are a lot easier. But when you cross the big ocean, it does really make things more complex. And that's really where communication and so forth is so critical to this new normal that we call it now. So that really goes into how do we really manage that creative process, both internally and with client. So for us, nothing's really changed. We're sort of half remote and half in office. So our office is in Arlington, Virginia, and half of our staff is in the office and the other half has been sort of remote, covering West Coast and down all the way down to Tennessee and so forth. So we're already very used to working in this sort of virtual world and remote world. So typically when we engage with a client, the big difference is that we would have in-person workshops, which has now gone to these virtual workshops, but they're actually much more effective and efficient in our opinion. So we were already prepared for this without knowing that the new normal was coming. So nothing has really changed much for us as far as the creative process, especially if you have the creative process in your DNA. So a process, as I mentioned, it's one of the things that really makes the agency world for some organizations successful is if you have a strong process and a strong team. So I always say that, the process always stays the same, but the tactics and strategies always change, for clients to meet their goals. And communication has always been important for, between the agency and the client, pre and now in the pandemic. It's always about being as transparent as possible internally and with the client and all the tools that are available for you. So it's actually what I'm learning being completely here from Switzerland is that project management is key for the success of any project. It's all about communication, the tools you use. It's all about making sure that you can have those tough conversations, via Zoom or in person. It doesn't matter. We're all still human. So some of the tools and communications that we've used before all this, we're still continuing to use are tools such as Jira and Confluence for our project management. We came off Basecamp as we grew. That Basecamp as a project management tool wasn't really scalable for us. So we moved on 2 years ago to really customizing a Jira and Confluence solution for us and our clients. And it's been just working amazingly great as a communication tool. And of course, one thing that we always, tend to forget even before the pandemic was that a lot of times you just pick up the phone and you talk to your client and your peers. It really goes a long way. So it's in our DNA to always, if there is an email or a piece of note that comes through that just doesn't make sense, go back to the old school way of picking up the phone and dial that number. It does go a long way. And then there's other beautiful tools out there. You got Envision App Link for prototyping. You got Slack for internal communication. And we also allow clients in our Slack channels right before, big critical deliverables and so forth, just to get the conversation going faster and more efficiently. I have found that a lot of people do get zoomed out a little bit. So we internally, when we have meetings, it's completely optional whether you want to have video on or not. Some people are uncomfortable, some people are not. It all depends, what your day is like and so forth. So we've made it very optional whether you want to have video on or video off. But for the most part, I had a lunch and learn yesterday, and it seemed like 80% of the company was on video. The other 20% were still there engaging, but they may have been doing some other work and just, a little bit more quieter. So it's completely optional for us. It's working really well. And for our clients, again, it's completely optional. We can have video. We can go back to Uber Conference and just have a dial number, which I actually prefer more than anything else because I like to walk and talk. So it's a little more effective for me when the video is not fully on. This is about how do you optimize workflow and pushing the creative that meets the needs of the client. So it's in our DNA, and I think that's the big thing is if whether it's in the pandemic or not, if you have it in your DNA to be creative and you have it in your DNA to not only push your own team, but also push the solutions for your clients, then, the creative is always going to be there. So one of our big pillars is always our work should never be templatized. It should be recognized. And in order to really do that, you got to push the envelope all the time. So as I mentioned earlier, the being here in Switzerland and just our team being remote, we've just found that this whole virtual thing has actually been very productive. So think about in-person meetings, the workshops that we conduct. They are time consuming, not only because you're there and you have to do it, but just the time that it gets to get there, time for the chit chat, time for grabbing a piece of coffee or any of those things that just add an additional amount of time. So we were just running some estimates just recently, and we're just realizing that an average workshop really saves us 2 hours. And just a meeting can save us a whole hour just by doing it remote or virtual. You log in, get the business done, and then you log off and you actually can do work. So a lot of the hours that we've been saving has just been pushed into more production work, and it's been amazing. So again, pushing creativity should always be part of an agency's DNA. That's why we are agencies, right? That's why we are being brought in to solve these complex solutions. And if you don't have that in your DNA, then you just, trying to shoot off your hip. So again, deeply rooted in our culture is also hiring right. I think for us, one of the things that has really allowed us to be successful prior or now in the pandemic is that there's a tremendous amount of tenure at our organization. So there's a huge level of trust built from many years of working next to each other at the office or whatnot. So now that we're remote, that trust factor is already there. And, we trust each other to get the job done. And we know what the other person's capabilities are, skill sets are, or where to push and where not to push. So in that sort of sense, it hasn't really changed. And again, but the other thing that we've put a lot of emphasis on is an increase in project management. So as Liz said earlier, like communication and so forth is so critical in this whole complete virtual environment, where then it really becomes about project management and making sure that you hold your team accountable, also the client, and do frequent check-ins and hit those project milestones. So we've actually, the past 6 months, although project management has always been a big part of our business, we've invested a tremendous amount more time into project management and team. We've hired more project managers. We've really sat down and we've reanalyzed, how do we onboard a client? Because when you onboard a client now, you have to be a lot more detailed because you're doing it virtual and you can't really solve a lot of the problems if you're not face-to-face. So we literally spend, when a project is kicked off, the first week is just detailed onboarding. There's multiple sessions of getting to know each other, covering the project, the scopes, the conversations, and so forth, the risks. One of the things that a lot of people don't really like to talk about are risks. And that's something that we bring up right from the beginning, because I think if you all go into a project with eyes wide open and identify what the risks are, I think you're just that much better off. When you do hit that risk item, you go back to your onboarding sessions and walk through the strategy to overcome that risk. So it's been really phenomenal how, this has evolved our agency even that much more. So a lot of my peers and so forth that I talk to, some of them are struggling and others are, just taking this bull by the horn and just doing amazing things with. And I think that, what this pandemic has done, yes, it's hurt some businesses and a lot of businesses, as a matter of fact, in the retail space and so forth. But for organizations that are in digital, we are here and this is our time to thrive and actually make a difference, because there is no other communication channels now. Digital is everything. So I've seen a huge amount of increase in engagement from our clients to really take digital more serious. So it's been an amazing past 6 months of a journey. So I'm personally thankful for that. That's it. So I promised I was going to keep my presentation very short, but really would love to hear questions or anything that we can help with. And Liz, your presentation was phenomenal. Thank you for sharing the insights of your organization.
I'll kick us off with a question I had for both of you. Ab, when you were talking about, moving to Switzerland kind of temporarily for these next few months, have you guys had team members moving around the country or the world? And if so, how has that been handled? Has that made your business more difficult in any aspects? Has it been good in any aspects? Has time zones played an issue? I would love to hear from Ab first, and then Liz, you can take it after that.
Sure. So I've encouraged the team, if this is the time, if you want to work out of Italy, well, probably not the best place to work out of, but if you want to move or if you want to try something new and work out of a RV, this is the time to do it, because it does work. Everyone is in the same boat as we are, right? Everyone's virtual. So it's the completely new norm, as much as I hate to say that. So I've encouraged our team members to do what I did. Nobody's taken that on me, but I did get one of my colleagues hit me up. His wife is Italian, and he said, I would love to work out of Italy next year. You know, what do you think? And I said, if you can deal with a time zone, then it's perfectly cool. This is the way that it's supposed to be, to give that flexibility to everyone. The one thing that I've seen a challenge for me, even though the first 2 months it wasn't that bad, was the time zone. So to give you an idea of my schedule, like I get up like everyone else. You know, I'm an early bird riser, so I get up at 6. I go for a walk or do whatever I want to do for 2 hours or so, and then I come back and I spend time with my family, and we do lunch and so forth. So I've actually had a lot more time with my family, which I didn't really have before, because when you're back home and things were just going at a million miles an hour, you had work first thing and you leave work and you get home by like 7 and you get an hour with your family. So this has really done wonderful things for me personally. But I am starting to see that it can wear off, because, for example, today, my day won't end until midnight. And I've been working since 8 o'clock your time, so it's 2 here. So it does, if you're not careful, it can definitely wear you out fairly quickly. So make sure that you have a strong process and you have a good communication cadence, and I think it can work out really well. But Andrew, ask me 2 months from now, and maybe I'll have a different answer.
I certainly will. And Liz, what about you?
We have not encouraged people to move remotely, and I respect and am envious of that to a certain extent. I think for us, we have not gotten there yet, mainly because I think we do work with a lot of DC-based clients and like the idea of being collaborative and having that in-person connection. It's not something that we're not opposed to, and even in terms of some of our new positions, we are open to remote things, so it's something we're talking about, but it isn't something that we're necessarily making that shift. I think the main reason why, and I got another question that relates to this, is just because we are an in-person collaborative agency that has pivoted to being remote and pivoted pretty seamlessly. However, we are not we haven't fully pivoted to being fully remote, where it's asynchronous, it is any hours, and the way you're managing projects and managing to clients shifts significantly. And I think for us, it's been a moment of like, are we switching there, and when is that? And there's just a lot tied up in that. And so it's something we're talking about a lot, but haven't made that switch.
Cool. I want to talk about the makeup of your teams and how they go about collaborating and creating the amazing projects that both of your agencies do. So just a quick backstory on how we're set up here at Greenbuzz Agency. For the longest time, for the entire existence of the agency, we were flat, and we maintained that flatness all the way through until November of last year. And at that point, we switched over into 5 different departments of roughly 5 or 6 people each. And that was so critical. It was so key for us. Had we entered into the pandemic with a flat organization, I think it would have been so much tougher, and it absolutely would have forced us to go into that more department type setup anyway. But I was just so relieved and so happy at the beginning of this that we had made that change when we did, because it gave folks 4 months or so to make the transition. And something that happens with those departments is they actually meet on a daily cadence at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day they kind of schedule when they want to have those meetings at the beginning and the end. And a lot of people told me after the fact that they actually really were not looking forward to having 2 meetings a day with their group. They thought it was just overkill. And I'm always up for adapting things and changing things up. So had it not worked out, we could have, but I've just heard so much positive feedback from having that setup. So many people saying like, it gives me that stability. And Liz, I think you mentioned how it's so important right now to just ask those questions on the personal side. And I think what a lot of those groups do is the first meeting of the day, they're really talking about where their work stands, what's going on with their projects, any challenges they might have. And I think the meeting at the end of the day is slightly more centered on the social aspect of what's going on in their lives and if they got a new puppy and all those sorts of awesome things. But, you know, and that's not to say that those groups only work with themselves. You know, it's the art department, and the art department has art directors and motion graphic designers, and they're working with producers and editors. So they're certainly working with the other folks, but just to have that sort of base. But just curious, as I've been describing that, you know, how are you set up? How are your two organizations set up when it comes to different departments?
For us, we do have different departments, and just like you, a while ago, a long time ago, when we were smaller, it was a flat organization. It was the thing to be. It was that trend, I think, back in 7-8 years ago, I think. But I think it's important to have hierarchy, and I think it's important to have departments and have department heads that can sort of hold people accountable and run their business. So 100%, I think departments and having different teams collaborate from different departments is critical to the success of an organization. I don't think you can be flat unless you're 3-4 people deep.
We have departments, but we don't have department heads. And so our teams, while we've been really considering how we're meeting and when we're meeting and what the importance of meetings are. Most of the departments are working on everybody's working on cross teams when it comes down to it. And so I think where our emphasis has been on project team meetings, in addition to balancing where you're collaborating with people within your department. And in terms of hierarchy, we have been flat, but one thing I didn't mention is we are going through some leadership changes because I am a relatively newly appointed president. I've been with the company for 11 years, but in the past year was appointed to president. So in that, we're trying not to change too much at once, which is part of where we're trying to get a little bit, this has been good time to get some of the ducks in a row in terms of that. And then we're assessing the needs moving forward.
Cool. And I want to jump over to, we've gotten a few questions in now in our Q&A section, which is great. And feel free to keep having those questions come in. The very first question that came in is a topic that Liz, I've spoken with you about one-on-one, Ab, I've spoken with you one-on-one about, and I know you both have a lot of thoughts about it, but it's the future of the office. What are you going to do with the office? What are you going to do with it in the short term? What are you going to do with it in the long term? And I know on our end, I was looking around and I was kind of seeing other agencies and how they were dealing with it. And I noticed that they would make certain proclamations on a return time. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I wasn't sure what data they were using to make those calls. And I was seeing people say, hey, we'll be back in September. We'll be back in December. We'll be back. And I was like, based on what? What information are you using to make those calls? Is that just a temporary thing so that then 2 months out from whatever arbitrary date that you put out there? So, just so we are at a point here at Greenbuzz where we'll be back in the office sometime between 6 to 18 months from now. And I know that's a giant time frame. I understand that. But at least it gives everyone the ability to plan ahead and say, hey, I know for a fact I won't be back in the office for 6 months. No one's expecting me to. So I can do other big plans. And whether that's move to Europe like you have, Ab, or it's something else, it just allows that flexibility to say, like, I can plan for this properly. And I was very honest and transparent. Like, the reason we're not giving a more definitive timeline is there's not perfect information in order to make that call. But yeah, I'm super curious to hear about each of your perspective on this.
That's exactly it. I think we all just need, sort of a timeline so you can plan. We've shut the office down until end of the year. And I think that just, and potentially, for next year. We have a lease on our office that extends to 2025. So eventually we'll return. And because we are very DC based and the workshops and so forth are so amazing and helpful for our clients that eventually when things come back to normal, but we want to be in the office. I do miss bringing donuts and so forth. So eventually we'll get there. But I think there's no rush on this, right? It's if people are proactive and they're motivated and they're enjoying, being at home and at the same time delivering, then does it really matter where they're at? Especially if we can't meet with clients right now. So we've said to end of the year, just because people need to know, a timeline. The office, you do not have to return. I will not be there. But what we have said is that you can use the office as an office hotel. If you are getting stressed out being at home, if you really need to go out and just, work out of a place and it's safer to go to the office than go to the coffee shop. So the reality is that our office is closed, but it's open, if that makes any sort of sense, just to give, our team that flexibility.
I totally agree. What is a plan in 2020? We have been pretty giving regular updates, and essentially for us, we also have a lease that's out for a while, so that's the infamous question. We've been trying to figure out what our options are on that end, but at the same time have been communicating. We're not going back anytime soon. A lot of what we're looking at as a metric is really schools and daycares, and once there's a solution that is working for most, not just a few, that's when we'll start to consider if we are going back to the office. But for now, we're not forcing or rushing the decision.
But the bottom line, I think we can all say, this is just a very interesting, crazy time. I mean, having, two working parents and having your kids at home because school has gone full remote. I mean, it's crazy. But I think at the end of the day, businesses that give their team that flexibility, I think really goes a long way.
Absolutely. So I'm curious to hear, and Todd, for you as well, like, what are your guys' thoughts on, I've heard talk of mental health days or half days that kind of pop up to give people a little bit of a break from the nonstop craziness that is this pandemic, and just the difficulty between separating work and home and people not being able to go out as much or go on vacation as much. What are your guys' thoughts on all that and implementing those kinds of days? And also, have you noticed any changes in how people are using their vacation time? Because I know I, for one, at Greenbuzz have seen, vacation is definitely being looked at a little bit differently this year than it was. I mean, I myself had a vacation last year that I planned for this November that I now can't do because it's an international travel thing. So, I was debating, do I hold on to that vacation time? Do I move it around now? Do I spread it out? Do I want a chunk of 5 days at home just sitting here? Do I want to take little days off here and there? How have you guys seen that all playing out on your end? And Ab, let's start with you.
I'm definitely seeing a lot of the staycation requests, which is great. We encourage that quite a bit, but I have noticed that the team has worked a lot more. It's difficult to clock out, right? I mean, it's 5 o'clock before you know it when you work from home, and you just keep on going. But we do encourage it, and Fridays we've asked everyone to stop work at 3 o'clock. Just go enjoy your weekend, be with your family, and just relax and come back on Monday fresh. That's working well. But even though we've said, hey, 3 o'clock on Fridays, I still see people on Slack at 6 o'clock on Fridays. So that it's an interesting thing, because yes, it's great to give that flexibility, but at the same time, a lot of your colleagues or whatever, their friends are somewhere else, or their parents are not here. So it's like they have nothing else to do, and they'll just, keep on working. And it's a dangerous thing to do. So we've been really, really trying to push as much that, if you need a health day, take a health day. If you need to do X, Y, Z, we encourage you. If you need to take 5-6 days off just to stay at home, do it. So I think it's important. It needs to be encouraged. I'm almost thinking that you should get penalized if you don't take time off.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you really have to tell people, like, please take the time off. You guys need it, even though you might not realize it in the moment. How about you, Liz?
Yeah, I agree. And I spoke to that a little bit. We've been encouraging it in full group meetings, but also one-on-one, trying to tell people. And if it's a matter of they're finding a hard time to get it in, helping to figure that out, but really just pushing people to do that when and where they can and they need it. I think it's critical and so important. And so we've been trying to encourage it in a way that's more flexible. Sometimes it's harder to, request it in advance. It's almost you need to do it more last minute just because you feel like you need a break or you're burnt out. And that is something we've been pretty supportive of and trying to help people to do when they need it.
How about you, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, we've done mental health days here. I think that, especially early on in the pandemic, I think everyone, regardless of whether they're at an agency or otherwise, was going through an emotional roller coaster. I think a lot of folks, were dealing with isolation. They were dealing with worrying about their family and the health and safety of their family. And I think that took a toll. And I think in particular, when it was clear that this wasn't going to be a handful of weeks or even a couple months, and there was kind of the reemergence of the initial wave, we took a mental health day then, because I think it just really was a big blow to almost everyone. I could just sense it in the conversations that we were having, and it made a lot of sense to do that. And we've done some additional, in terms of taking time off, I've noticed, people, they were going to go to a wedding, they were going to take time off. Like yourself, Andrew, with your vacation, I think that happened a lot, and people canceled it and they're like, well, I don't want to just, be here and just be stuck here. But I really do think the two things go hand in hand. I think, it makes sense for an organization to give out a mental health day, but I also think, to Ab's point, I think it's very important that people are proactive in taking time off and making sure that, that they're taking the rest and taking the break that they need from work. Is very, very critical. So I've seen, less vacation requests and less vacation taken up until this point. We've definitely been pushing that, and we do a weekly email update here at Greenbuzz Agency, and we certainly put that messaging in there. And I've noticed, certainly in the month of August, more people have taken off than any other month, which is a great sign. But I just think it's really critical for anyone, regardless of if you're at an agency or not. So I want to kind of take a big pivot here and talk about, the massive kind of cultural moment that has taken place during the pandemic, which is the Black Lives Matter movement. And, I've read some literature out there about people and where they work, and that's their cultural epicenter. Whereas in the past, they would have had other outlets, whether it was their neighbors, maybe it was church, maybe it was something else in the past. Now more than ever, folks see where they work as their cultural institution, and where they feel like they have a voice to say something. And so when Black Lives Matter movement happened, and is still happening, and I'm just curious, how did your agency respond, and what, if any, sort of initiatives did you look at? I know here at Greenbuzz, we looked at our hiring practices. We looked at where were we posting our jobs, what language were we using in the postings that we were doing. We kind of feel like our big superpower that we have here is the ability to tell a really dynamic story and amplify a message, and what organizations were out there that we could help amplify their message and help tell their story in a more dynamic way than maybe they would have the ability to do. And we had a couple other really cool initiatives too, and I'm kind of proud at how all of that is going. And the converse to all of that is someone could easily call us out and say, well, why didn't you have that before? And I think that's a very fair point. And all I can say to that is, at least we have taken some steps and are definitely moving in the right direction. But Liz and Ab would love to hear your thoughts on kind of how you responded to that moment.
Sure. Sensitively. That's great, Todd, to hear everything that you guys are doing. And I think that it is important in general that you're taking the time to reflect and figuring out what does make sense to move the conversation forward, instead of looking back at why you didn't. It's more about what you do now. For us, I think it was an extreme time to look out for mental health internally and externally, and try to make sure that we were having the conversations that needed to happen with the team, and talking about things openly and creating space for a conversation around it. That became top of mind for me. As a Black woman, it was something for me that also put added weight and pressure on the need to be a part of the conversation and find my voice in the conversation, not only personally, but also as a leader of this agency. And so that was something that, instead of jumping right in the conversation, for us, for me, it was more important to take the time to figure out what our role was going to be in it and what we can do. And I think we have incredible space to guide the conversation even more with our clients. We've been doing stuff internally to create, improve on the conversation that we've been having, and just being open to have conversations with people and make sure that there's that openness within is what's most important to me.
Definitely is a tough time. I mean, not only do you have pandemic, and then you have all these additional things that are just hitting us left and right. So it's an interesting time. For us, like we're diverse in our DNA. So it wasn't as difficult as it may have been for others, but we did, like you, Todd, look at our hiring practices even more. We had town hall meetings, and then we had opened our doors for each individual to come to us and have, honest and open conversations. We surveyed the team and so forth. So I think internally, we did, well. I think I think we handled it really, really well. But then again, it's in our DNA. The thing that we didn't do, we just weren't really public about it. We decided from the beginning that, these things are an internal matter for us within our own agency. So we didn't really write a blog post about it, or we didn't really promote, these things, because we thought that this was a very sensitive topic for us internally, and we grieved about it internally with each other. So that's how we coped with it. But we did look at our hiring practices. We said, okay, what are we going to do in the future? How do we, make this better for the team, at WDG and our clients? So it's definitely a sensitive topic, and it's a tough one. Like sometimes when I think about it, just you get shivers that all this stuff is really happening.
The kind of segue into something you just said, Ab, about like internal versus external. How are you guys seeing your clients reacting to the pandemic, to these social movements? What changes are you seeing in them? Are you seeing a lot of work getting, Liz, you had mentioned that one client felt like it was kind of insensitive and the tone and the timing wasn't right on one project, so it kind of got delayed. We've definitely seen deadlines and stuff getting pushed around, and things are much more flexible than they've ever been in terms of a company going, let's just push that back another week, or let's shift this over here. How has that affected your teams? How have you seen your clients reacting to all this?
I think for us, it's been tough for our clients. I think it's been tough for our clients because they didn't have the remote work culture to begin with, right? So if you work with a lot of nonprofits in DC or associations and so forth, they're very, in DC, K Street, button up, show up and leave. So I think it was a tough adjustment for our clients, as far as I'm noticing. But, they caught on quick, and I feel that now I'm seeing a lot more productivity from our clients as well, and the rate of communication has increased. And I think they're also really realizing how important digital now is. As I mentioned earlier, it's like the main primary, way of communicating now. There's no more events. So how do you really, bring your voice and tone out in the digital world? So I think it's been a curse and a blessing for our clients, but I think they're realizing that this is the way it's going to be for a while. So I think they're getting much more better at handling it.
Right. How about you, Liz?
Yeah, it definitely took them a little longer to pivot to being remote and getting situated. I think that was definitely a challenge, and as I mentioned earlier, there was a range of their ability to kind of keep moving and or pause to reevaluate. I think the thing that we're most aware of in terms of the challenge is almost less of the now. And while we think the future is uncertain right now, we're very aware of it into the future and looking 6 months, into 2021. because the nonprofit sector historically is one that lags behind. So while a lot of the budgeting is secured for now, it's really, nobody knows what it's going to look like next year. And so that's something we're just keeping conversations open and trying to be aware of, and plan smart in terms of what are the priorities to get done now and what can wait, knowing that what's ahead might change, and is and will be uncertain.
Cool. And I want to end it on this. I'm curious to hear of everything we talked about today, or maybe we haven't brought it up yet. What has been the biggest pivot during the pandemic for your agency? And I'll kick it off with the services that we offer. I mean, we are a video production company, and a lot of what we do is filming something, whether it's a documentary and interview subjects or an event, or, you know, it's filming something and then taking that footage and editing it into a story. And that, you know, we had 27 shoots lined up for those 2 weeks in March that obviously have been postponed. That's a lot of work to replace. And so we've had to pivot into other services that we've never done before. You know, probably the largest category being Instagram live shows, running events. You know, we did the Peabody Awards this year, a giant award show. Had never done something like that, doing big conferences and you know, virtual tours of museums and senior care living facilities where people can't walk through. Those are all brand new services for us that just, you know, we needed to have in order to keep our staff full and not reduce anything. And you know, and we're very proud of the fact that we have been able to make it here 5.5 months into this with everything intact, just given how much we depended on live video production and filming. So I'm curious from each of you, what has been your biggest pivot throughout this whole thing?
I mean, I can start because I maybe have the easiest answer to this. As I mentioned, Three Spot's been around for 21 years, and we've had 2 founders that have been leading the agency. They are both still there, but it was approximately a week before the pandemic that I was, 2 weeks before the pandemic, before we went remote, that I was announced as president. And so that in itself has been a huge pivot in a way that I think I hope has been helpful, in the sense that it's one voice that's primarily communicating to the team and working with them, which has allowed a little bit of focus and hopefully, you know, preventing some unnecessary, like, kind of confusion at this time that was needed. We needed focus heading into this pandemic. So I think that leadership shift has been one that's been a change. It's significant when we've been operating one way for so long.
And I think for us, the biggest pivot is that some of the new people within our organization I've never met. So that's been a big thing, because, you know, it's always about meeting, getting to know somebody, have that coffee and so forth. And now, like, literally, I got several coworkers where I've never met, and it's interesting. It's weird, but at the same time, you know, it works. But the other thing that's also been a pivot for us a little bit is that even though we've done other services like these virtual tours and things like that, they were done at a smaller scale, and now we're pushed in to do these on a massive scale and quickly. So that's been a pivot. You know, you have to do what you have to do for your clients, I guess.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all of the time that we have for today's webinar. To everyone who joined us, thanks so much for stopping by. We hope you had a fun time and learned a couple of things along the way that could help you and your businesses and your teams. And be on the lookout for our next webinar, which is next Thursday, August 27th, featuring Allison Walsh, the head of global PR and digital media at Stoli Group, and Nori Lee, the digital marketing senior manager at Sodexo. They'll be talking about fostering community and transparency to build brand loyalty. It's going to be another awesome session, I'm sure, with a lot of hands-on takeaways. So we hope to see everybody there. And then finally, an enormous thank you to Liz and Ab for sharing your time and insights with us today. We really, really appreciate it. And we know our audiences did as well. So yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.